Raw milk is one of those kind of hot button issues right now. I've seen it all over on social media, it's in the news and everything, and it tends to be one of those topics where you have people staunchly on one side or the other of kind of the debate, I guess. And as with most things, I find myself in what I consider to be the reasonable middle. And there's a lot of reasons why a person might be seeking out raw milk. If you're watching this video, maybe you're doing it because you or someone in your family has a dairy sensitivity and you're looking kind of for some options. Maybe it's for nutritional reasons. Maybe it's for kind of working on your gut, microbiome. Whatever the reason, it makes perfect sense to be checking out raw milk. However, raw milk is a food that it's not all created equal. So I don't want to just say like it's good or it's bad, because if I was somewhere and I didn't know anything about where that milk came from, how the animals were treated, what testing was being done, so on and so forth, I'd probably say no thank you to that glass of raw milk. But in different situations, I'd be much more comfortable with it. So as someone who has been on all sides of it, I have produced raw milk and sold raw milk from our farm. I have purchased raw milk when our cows are dried down. Heck, I'm a nursing mom. I produce raw milk kind of in my own way. And so, and I have a lot of years experience. I also am the host of the Family Milk Cow podcast, where we talk more about this topic as well. So today in this video, I'm really going to try and break down a lot of things for you and help you decide if raw milk is something you do want to buy or, start having for your family. And if so, what are the things you need to be looking for to do so safely? Now, if you don't know me, you're new here. Hi, my name is Kelsey. I'm your best friend on the homestead. I live in northern Minnesota on a small farm with my family. And again, like I said, I have had cows for well over 10 years. I host a podcast about family milk cows. And this is an area that I'm really passionate about. And so in this video, I'm going to take you through just about everything I can think of to help you decide if this is a good choice for your family. Because, if you're here for nutrition or milk sensitivities, etc., at the end of the video, if you listen to all this and decide, raw milk isn't something you're comfortable with, there's some other ways that you can maybe address those needs that aren't going to involve raw milk. So we'll talk about that at the end. But in this video, I'm going to take you through as much as I can think of to help you make a good decision for you and your family, and to do so in a safe way. So this video is not going to have a lot of like bells and whistles and things to look at. It's just going to be me sitting here talking with you, my friend, and talking you through this process. This is a great video to throw on while you're making dinner or dropping off kids from school or picking, whatever, just kind of to have on and listen to while you keep your hands busy with something else. Okay, let's dive in. So first of all, I'm not going to debate anybody in the comment section about raw milk, because I feel very comfortable and confident with my education in this area, and people are welcome to ask questions. I love questions that are coming from an earnest place. But if you're here just to try and like start a fight in the comment section, I'm just going to delete your comment and block you from my channel. So don't even try and start something in the comments. I'm all about cooperative figuring things out in education, but don't come here and try and be a troll. I won't stand for it. So comment section is going to be a safe place that I'm going to keep an eye on. So raw milk, it's a big topic, and one of the first things to cover, I think, is the legality of raw milk. I'm in the United States, and depending on where you are in the world, raw milk may or may not be legal, and it may or may not have different regulations on it if it is legal. We'll talk a little bit about the UK in a few minutes, because I really appreciate kind of how they handle raw milk over there. I think it's a nice sort of model that people could follow. Here in the United States, raw milk legality varies completely on whatever state you're in. So some states it is strictly, completely illegal. Like Hawaii, for example, it's illegal. There's one other state where it is totally and completely illegal. And then you've got on the other far end of the spectrum, some states where it is pretty much just legal. I could go milk my cow, put it in a mason jar, and sell it at the gas station, which for me, that's a little bit, I want a little more regulation on raw milk if I'm going to be getting it, or a little more sort of ways to check in to make sure that things are being handled properly. And so you have kind of everything in between those two. Here in Minnesota, for example, you can have on-farm sales of milk. I can't advertise it anywhere. It just has to be kind of like a guy sort of a thing. People have to bring their own jars to me, and then I put the milk in their jars and send it with them. And it's only for, quote, occasional sales of raw milk. And then some places it's legal for different ways. So let's talk about kind of the different ways that people get raw milk in their states. So some states where it is completely legal, they may or may not have it regulated. So like I said, I want to say it's Wyoming, where it's kind of just like the Wild West. I could be wrong. I'll put a comment below. I'll look it up, where there's really no regulation. You can just sell it, even retail, and people can buy it. And then you also have places, I think like Vermont, for example, where there's like a regulatory process where they are checking to make sure the milk that you're getting is not milk that's going to make you or your family really sick. And that's kind of more where I'm comfortable with it, is in that sort of form. So even if it's available on the shelf at your store, find out what your state's regulations are in terms of what do they have to go through before they can sell that milk on the shelf. So retail, you can sell retail. That's in some states. Very few have it that way. Other states have like Minnesota, where it's on farm sales. You can go to the farm and you can buy it. Some have direct to consumer is legal, and there can't be a middleman. So I can't take it to a grocery store and have them sell it to you. I can take it to a farmer's market and sell it to you, or you can come to the farm and I can sell it to you, or you can stop at my farm stand and I can sell it to you. But it has to come from me to you. So that's one kind of legal way they do it, is just direct to consumer. Another way is through pet milk. And this one is very much sort of a loophole that people use, where raw milk is legal for sale and use as pet milk, but people buy it kind of as pet milk and then use it for human consumption. So that's one of the other kind of, loopholes, regulatory things. And then another one that you might hear or see is cow shares or herd shares. So what that looks like is you purchase a share of a cow. So if you were to do that here, you would, I don't know how many, it depends on how many shares they have per cow, but let's say I sell 4 shares per cow. So you and 3 other people would technically own that cow. And so the milk you're getting is milk from your cow. I'm just kind of handling it for you. And then there's usually a buy-in cost to buy part of your cow. And then there might be like a monthly kind of fee. It kind of varies depending how that looks in each state and then in each specific cow share, herd share situation. And again, the legality is really vary widely. In some states, you can sell raw milk as long as it's less than 6 goats and less than 1 cow. And it's all very particular. I'll put a link in the description if you want to kind of read that, because not only is it particular at each state, it can also change with the legislative sessions if people are trying to move through kind of some raw milk stuff. So it's something to just kind of be aware of and keep in mind as you're going to buy raw milk. That's kind of, find out what it is in your state, and then you'll understand how you have to go about finding it. So the big thing that people get really alarmed with raw milk for is the fact that it can make you sick. It absolutely can. I would say it is higher risk in terms of food. I think about when I was in high school, I think it was that one of those sub restaurants had to stop carrying Sprouts because it kept making people sick. They're getting salmonella from Sprouts. So there are certain foods like, romaine lettuce, I feel like every year comes up that it's got something, there's just certain foods that are higher risk, and raw milk is one of those. So if I was making this video in my 20s, I'd be much more cavalier about this and like, no, as long as the cows are clean, the equipment's clean, looks good, like you're fine. But I am now in my mid 30s. I have 3 small children. And so kind of my perspective on this and my comfort level with this, even as someone who raises dairy animals, has changed quite a bit. So the first thing I would look for if you're going to be getting raw milk from somebody is making sure they are disease testing their cows. What's pretty typical is that cows will be tested for tuberculosis, is one that's usually annually, or as I was saying in the UK, if you're going to buy raw milk over there, they, I believe, test quarterly for tuberculosis, and I think even brucellosis maybe. And then they have like monthly testing that the animals have to go through. And then they have, testing consistently of the milk that it has to go through as well. I'll link to, I can't remember what the website is or what it's called, but the kind of raw milk organizing unit in the UK. I'll link that below too, so you can kind of see how they do things. But so you want to make sure whoever you're getting your milk from is regularly testing their animals. So tuberculosis is a big one. Brucellosis is another one. They might also be testing for things like Q fever. And these are things that the animals have that they're kind of like sick with, or a disease that they have that can be passed to you through the milk. So you can get tuberculosis, which I know sounds like an old, like consumption, like an old disease that doesn't exist anymore. And for the most part, it's largely eradicated, but it's still something that you need to be careful for. You can get that from drinking raw milk, and that comes from the animal to you. It's not like an outside pathogen. So that's something I would make sure they have some sort of regular testing schedule for that, and then find out, okay, and then if it comes back positive, what do you guys do? Like, is that animal are you figuring out what animal it is and calling them from the herd or taking them out of milk production? Find out kind of what they do with those results. So their animals should be tested regularly for disease. The next thing that you want to look for is they should be regularly testing for pathogens in the milk. So this means that something is getting into the milk during the milking process or during the handling process. And so there's quite a few things that people should be regularly testing their raw milk for. And I wrote down my list here because there's no way I was going to remember all of them. So some of the ones you want them to test for: E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, coliforms, Campylobacter, and they typically should be doing a standard plate count, and that is looking at kind of like the bacterial colonies total. And I don't know if it's like, if that's by state or nationwide, what if they'd have the limit on that, but there are regulations for what, you know, maximum it should be. And so for the most part, I find that producers that are making raw milk, their numbers are always way, way lower. I remember I worked at an organic, well, not organic, they still did stuff organic, though they weren't technically organic. It was a grass-based dairy. We were milking like 7 cows, just unbelievably clean. They're out on pasture, just like, you know, sort of how you imagine cows to be. And their somatic cell count, which is kind of a general, they test the milk from all the animals is pooled, and they test that and see, it measures, I believe, the white blood cells, I want to say, which means if there's like illness or something, that blood cell count is higher because those, you know, they have more of those blood cells to attack the disease or the sickness. And their somatic cell count was always, I think like the highest it can be is like 100,000 at a conventional dairy, and theirs was like less than 100. It was insane. It was they won awards for it all the time. So that's something that you want to pay attention to. Their somatic cell count, and then the standard plate count as well. So again, and I'll put that up here maybe on the screen: E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, coliforms, a standard plate count, Campylobacter, and a somatic cell count. So I know that sounds like a lot, but it typically, if they are a legitimate producer of raw milk, this should just be kind of part of their routine. And I will say, if you are buying from a smaller farmer, like me, for example, that might not be something that they are keeping up with. And unfortunately, because these are things that can get into your milk, it's not coming direct from the cow, it's something that's coming in from the outside. Basically, every time you milk a cow, you do have a chance of some of those things getting in there. So that's up to you as far as your comfort level. I know some kind of other small farmers where they don't test every batch of milk, but they will test like once a month or something like that, just to see, you know, if this is something that is getting in their milk and making sure their numbers are low enough, and then kind of just going from there. So that's up to you what your comfort level is. So just, but be aware that those are the things that you should hopefully be seeing them test their animals for. The next thing you want to know about is their milking routine. Again, this is going to vary greatly if you're just buying milk from a neighbor who's milking 1 or 2 cows compared to a dairy that's milking, you know, 30 cows. It's going to look a lot different, but especially in the small scales where you really want to ask more of these questions, because they won't be selling to a larger market. But so you want to make sure what their milking routine looks like. Where are they milking their cow? Is it a clean place? Is their cow being brushed well beforehand? Are the teats being sanitized? Are they sanitizing the teats with just dish soap, or are they actually using like a sanitizing solution for cleaning those teats before they milk? Are they milking by hand into a bucket? Or are they milking with a machine? I would tend towards milking with a machine is more enclosed, so you're way less likely to get like, you know, drifting dust or a fly from the barn or something landing in the milk. But on the one thing that you do need to pay attention then too is how are they sanitizing their milking equipment? They should not just be, again, washing it out with dish soap. They should be having a detergent, an acid rinse, and I think just like a cool water rinse. Or is there 3 things? I'll have to look that one up too. But they should be running different, so that sanitizing solutions through their milking equipment, so that way, you know, pathogens aren't building up in the equipment. So I would look for a clean environment, clean cows, preferably machine milked, and then their machinery should be being very thoroughly and properly cleaned. The next thing is, how are they handling the milk? Milk should not be stored in food grade plastic that's being reused, at least like on a smaller scale. You know, if you're getting from a bigger dairy, food grade plastic makes sense. I mean, you buy milk from the store like in a jug, that's not such a big deal, but they shouldn't be collecting milk in food grade plastic down in the barn. It should be all handled in stainless steel or glass. Once the milk comes in, it should be filtered immediately, and within the hour of that milk being collected, it should be chilled down to less than 40 degrees. And so this, I know this sounds kind of intimidating if you're, you know, buying raw milk from someone for the first time and you're like, okay, tell me, you know, how quickly are you chilling your milk down to 40 degrees? But if they are someone who has the respect you need to have when producing raw milk, they will be happy to answer these questions for you, and they will be probably pleased that you're asking these questions. So I know it might seem a little weird, but these are all things that in order for you, if raw milk is what you want to drink, to do so as safely as possible. These are the things you have to know before you get that milk. Now, I am going to link in the description box below to an article I have over on my blog, Rough and Tumble Farmhouse, where I talk about how to buy raw milk from a farmer. Just kind of, a lot of times people just don't know sort of the proper etiquette, and especially when milk is concerned, you just want to make sure you're doing things right, asking the right questions, doing things the right way. So I'll link to that article down below. And then two, if you have found this so far, because we're not quite done yet, I have a couple more things to cover. If you have found this helpful or interesting or educational, I'd love it if you would subscribe. I'm all about kind of the combination of research-based, factual information and incorporating also sort of the more kind of folksy things that we have learned from experiences. I think that's where a lot of things really exist and do well, is kind of in that in-between where the things kind of collide, like that Venn diagram of science, science and reality, and then also like, this is what we know because we're living it and doing it and so forth. So please hit that subscribe button if that's kind of the style you like to jive with. All right, lastly, as I said in this video, I was going to be covering some options if after listening to this, if you're just thinking, you know, raw milk is maybe something that's just a little more that I want to dip my toes into. It sounds like a little too much work or too risky or whatever. That's totally your call. Please do not feel bullied either way into not drinking or drinking raw milk. I will say, if after listening to kind of my list of things you should be looking for in order to get raw milk safely, if you don't have a source that ticks those boxes, then personally I would not choose to have raw milk at this time, just because it's too risky as far as I'm concerned. But that's just me. I'm more risk averse than I used to be. For our own cows, for example, we used to just drink the milk raw for years. And then after my son was born, for whatever reason, I was having issues with clearly some sort of bacteria or something was getting in the milk. I was getting like a little mold type spot or some spore in the top of my milk. Couldn't figure it out. I was postpartum. I was exhausted. I was stressed. I was dealing with postpartum depression. I was like, you know what? I do not need one more thing to stress me out. So what I chose to do for our family is do like a long time low heat pasteurization, because there are different ways of pasteurizing milk. Usually when you get milk from the store, it has been just, the heat has been cranked up and it has been just like every bit of bacteria in there has been nuked out of it. But you can get milk, and if you do buy raw milk, you can choose to pasteurize it differently, where it's at that lower temperature for a longer time, and that allows less of the nutrient breakdown to happen. And so that's what we choose to do with our animals. And then what we do is kind of add in sort of the gut health stuff separate from that. So this is actually kind of good to roll into if raw milk is more than you want to dip your toe into. What are sort of your options to still kind of achieve some of those means? So as far as nutrition goes, that is an option. Some people do sell pasteurized milk that has been pasteurized that way, where it has not been heated as high. You have less nutrient breakdown. So that's an option. Another option, like I was talking about, is getting a pasteurized milk. And if you're looking for kind of that gut health sort of a thing, adding in those sort of good bacterias after the fact. So making yogurts, you can make kefir. I have videos for all this stuff on my channel, how to make all these things. You could also do it, instead of relying on your milk for those healthy bacteria, you could do other fermented foods, sauerkrauts, kimchi, fermented carrots. Like fermented baby carrots takes about 3 minutes to put together. It's amazing. It's so easy. Again, I'll link to that video too. So you can get healthy bacteria in your gut in other ways that don't involve raw milk. Or it can involve milk, but then you just add that kind of those healthy bacterias that you know what they are and trust them after the fact. Now, if a dairy sensitivity is what has kind of brought you to raw milk, then some other options you can check out are A2 milk. So there's different proteins in the milk, and what that milk protein is depends on if the cow that it came from is A1, A2 or A2. There's different, it gets really scientific really fast, but basically A2 milk is milk that is being produced from all cows. That's the kind of milk they produce. That's what the proteins are A2 proteins. And so in those situations, it has been found, they haven't done a ton of research on it, but I read a few papers where the evidence seems to suggest that people who have dairy sensitivities can handle A2 milk. So that is something to look into. I know in our area, there is at least one dairy who does all A2. So check into that if sensitivities are something for you, if there is an A2 milk in your area that you can buy. Another option to check out is maybe just unhomogenized, might make a difference with your sensitivities. So homogenization is when they basically bust up all the milk proteins so that when you buy a thing of whole milk, you don't have cream rising to the top. It's just all one kind of, thick consistency. Versus unhomogenized, they don't do that. It's still pasteurized. They've still, gotten rid of bacteria in it, but the cream will still separate out to the top. So people sometimes with the sensitivity, that has made a difference getting milk that is unhomogenized. And lastly, you might just want to try a different species of milk. Goat milk, for example, it gets a bad rap sometimes, but goats raised properly. When we raised our goats, my mom, who is a self-proclaimed goat milk hater, I had her try a little bit of goat milk and a little bit of cow's milk. She could not tell which was which. Goats that are raised properly and well make delicious milk. Again, there's a difference in the protein structures and the fat structures in goat milk that can make it a lot easier for people with sensitivities to consume. And then there are other milks too. There's sheep milk out there, camel milk, there's a lot of different options. So trying a different dairy might help with your sensitivity to, if regular cow milk isn't working for you, try the A2, try unhomogenized, and if all that doesn't work, then try a different species. Okay, so I think I have yacked enough. I'm really hoping that this video is very helpful for people who are just kind of overwhelmed by the whole thing. I know there was a lot that we covered in this video, so if you have more questions or things you kind of want to unpack a little bit more, please put them in the comments. As you go forth into, getting raw milk or not getting raw milk, just remember that it is a higher risk food, and that's something that you need to be educated about and you need to be forthright about when you're buying it, looking for the things that I told you to look for, and then hopefully whether you go for raw milk or you don't, that you're feeling confident, that you're able to provide whatever you're trying to provide, whether it is, gut health or getting past a milk sensitivity, whatever it is. I hope that this has helped you find the right choice for you and for your family. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you here next week for more from our Rough and Tumble farmhouse.